All right, there we are. Welcome, everyone. It is the 16th of June, 2026. My name is Luke Thomas. I run by Substack by name, and I am joined, as you can see, on the right of your screen, but to my left, excuse me, well, I guess I have my screen mirrored, so to my right now as well, is Kareem Zidane. How do you describe yourself these days, Kareem? What kind of journalist are you?
Well, I think I just stuck to the investigative journalist title, covering intersection of sports and politics. But I mean, I'm a commentator now. I write op-ed essays. I'm an author now as well. So I don't even know. I don't even know
Yeah.
what's.
I just got the email about your book. I want to talk about that in a minute. We're going to plug the whole thing. But let's just sort of get right to it if we can. You and I did a discussion last week, and we've been covering this in one way or another for a long time. On Sunday was the UFC White House event. I just put up on my politics YouTube channel my kind of political review on Fight Night. I was going to do both on Fight Night, Kareem, and then they pushed everything back because of the weather, which, you know what? I will say this. They were right to push it back because all the forecasts, even locally, were like real bad. And then nothing happened. And then it just took forever to get through that show. So I didn't end up getting to bed till like 3 o'clock, 3:30. And I didn't even do a political review. And I also, you know what? I wanted to digest. You've had a moment to digest. I've read your coverage. I've not heard your NPR interview yet, but let me just pitch it to you overall. Give me the first thing you thought of when the UFC White House event had concluded.
It's two distinct thoughts that merge together, Luke. One is, oh my God, we've been waiting years for the UFC to put on a production masterclass like that, something with the pageantry of the old Pride FC days. That's one of the actual thoughts I had. Then the second thought was, too bad it had to be associated with such a grotesque propaganda spectacle at the same time. So really, it's those two connected things. It's ironic, isn't it? Because I think as MMA fans, we've been desperately begging the UFC to give us something other than their stale product for so long. That Marine band, I'm sorry if they have an official name, I'm not sure what it
The
is, but
president's own.
the president's own, I mean, they were fantastic. They were just
Mm.
fantastic. Like, it's hard. Those were the things. It's very conflicting because I'm watching it. I'm thinking, my God, what a performance. Incredible renditions as these fighters are coming out. It gave it such a unique touch. But then you're watching the sheer militarism of the event, the propaganda of it all. The words that you gave me, Luke, when we were in the interview about how uh, the service people in attendance are going to be props. That really came to fruition. It was in my mind the whole time as we were watching this event. Is that all these people are there as props, not just the people watching, but the military honor guard that each UFC fighter received. Like, this was a bizarre event in so many ways, but at the same time, it might have been the most masterfully executed production event that the UFC's ever done.
I want to talk about so many of the political angles, but I really want to just echo some of what you're saying here. I mean, folks, I mean, if you've never served in the military, and again, I don't know what the Army is like, and I only experienced the Marine Corps, in a limited basis. But if you're in the Marine Corps and if you're in that band and the president only ever, I mean, the Marines are the only ones that guard the White House. They're the only ones that are in his band. It's strictly a Marine Corps thing. If you're if you have that job, they don't make you do anything else. Like, that's what you do for the Marine Corps, and they only do that in the most narrow of circumstances where it's like, the world class athlete program or something like this. So I agree with you. I thought it was incredible. You know what really stuck out to me about it all is there were plenty of things to be upset about, and we're going to get to them. But it did kind of occur to me, Kareem. It's like I feel like I've been trying to understand why MMA fans haven't really not rebelled against Dana, but maybe spoke out a little bit more about this event, right? Like because I can, we saw it when he went to Florida. It wasn't exactly the warmest reception, especially by UFC standards, right? I mean, he didn't get booed, but everyone was kind of like, all right, whatever. And if you look at polling around young men, which is the core part of the UFC's audience, support for him has collapsed. And yet there was like rabid enthusiasm for this. And the only conclusion I can draw is that the modern MMA fan is so starved for anything other than assembly line MMA. And that's not just from UFC. If you think about it, PFL, I think under this new regime is trying, but Kareem, what can they really do? They have,
Mm.
relatively speaking, much more limited resources financially in terms of talent too. But they're just so completely starved for pageantry that they're basically willing to be like, yeah, you know what? Listen, and I saw a bunch of man on the street interviews here on my local news. And a bunch of the people were like, yeah, I mean, I don't really love everything the president's doing, but I'm so ready for this event. And I think that really kind of captures it. They're willing to be party to this because they've just never gotten a chance to really indulge high level pageantry that we grew up experiencing much more readily.
We're a very different generation of MMA fan, right? Like we grew up with Pride FC and these other entities that did believe in the pageantry and the spectacle and the freak show element of MMA, which is a core part of it. The UFC spent years undergoing this legitimization process, and part of that was sort of expunging these sides of the sport, the pro wrestling esque elements of it. But the UFC also experienced a massive sort of surge in popularity in the COVID era. And that was when everything was suddenly limited to the apex. First of all, there was a period with no events whatsoever. Then you were stuck with the apex. And I mean, there's nothing more vapid and dull, and it makes me less of a fight fan than ever than watching something in the apex, just flat out. Just we'll put that on the record there. So of course, suddenly when you're given this fan festival, you're told this event is taking over Washington, and this is a sport. Listen, I can't speak for the most modern fan, the fans who've gotten into the sport in the last couple of years. But for us, I think we carry the same chip on our shoulder that the UFC did and that any MMA fan did back in the day, which is a we believe in this sport. The rest of the world doesn't seem to believe in it, still seems to think it's barbaric. We'll show them one day. It's part of what my coverage was back in the day, was sort of trying to uh, express how much this was a sport like any other, was extremely popular and worth your attention. We're finally getting that attention, but it comes with the cachet that it also has to be attached to this administration in particular. But for these MMA fans, going to this fan festival, experiencing that, getting to be a significant aspect and part of Washington, D.C., a city that you would never really thought would be a UFC home, even for one night, is empowering for a lot of MMA fans, to say the least, right? So I think they come out of this event feeling happy and excited about the future of MMA. Maybe some, like us, will be alarmed and concerned by the political side of it, and I definitely have thoughts I want to share there. But I think we cannot underestimate how impactful the main event specifically was. I'll tell you this, look, I was watching the event with a bunch of friends, many of whom a couple hadn't seen MMA before ever, really, and a few hadn't watched for a while. And my wife was there as well, also hadn't. My wife's been around since we've been together for 16 years, so she's been around since the very early days of me watching the sport, and looked at me and said, "Hey, I don't recognize any of what's happening on the screen anymore. Not in terms of the fighters, but in terms of the presentation, the propaganda." But when we were watching the main event, when it looked like Justin Gaethje was about to do the impossible and actually defeat Poirier, I turned to them and said, "I'm actually feeling like I used to feel back in the day. This is this feeling of, oh my God, I love this. I remember now exactly what I love about this." So if you're having this effect on me with everything I've experienced in this cesspool and how much I've been sort of forced into an outsider role in this space, then can you imagine the impact it's had on standard fans who aren't worried or burdened by any of this? This is the power of sports, right? This is why I say things like, sure, this World Cup was joyless and is being labeled as joyless to begin with, but once the games start, things change. This is a true power of sports, and the UFC and Trump couldn't have had a better ending to that show. Absolutely cemented everything they want to achieve.
I will say a couple things in response. I do think that the UFC is probably not happy that two of their biggest stars in Powhatan and
Good point.
Taporia got smoked. I think that's a little bit neither is necessarily fatal, obviously, but that is one problem. And I just want to say something too. I did a lot of media. I'm sure you did a gazillion things as well. And one of the questions I got like pushback on is, again, to sort of set the tone here about the fans, and then we'll get to the political elements. Is that people were like, I was trying to explain to them, like, MMA has been contracting. It's kind of hot in Europe and it's kind of hot in Japan ish, but everywhere else it's basically contracting. And certainly domestically, MMA has contracted in a noticeable degree. And this has, to me, primed the pump for coming out and saying, if we're going to go big, let's go big with Donald Trump. Like, what other way could you get anyone who even had halfway difficult feelings about that to look the other way? But then to, as we indicated, starved fans for this. But on top of it, like, I think they were trying, to me, there was also like a projection of strength just by UFC itself. And UFC is doing very, very well financially by virtue of the deals that they have. But it was also like changing the narrative about what has happened to MMA through this quite measurable contraction, as well as the implications of what it means for Trump. I just wanted to put one note on there. If you want to add to that, please do. If not, we can just sort of turn to the political side.
And just with regards to the contraction of the sport, it's shocking to me. I mean, I'm based in Canada, and do you remember when Dana White used to call Canada the mecca of combat sports?
I
It's
went to
amazing.
GSP versus Shields in that giant show.
I was there too, and
Mm.
it's sort of reminded. That was the last time I remember fans being that excited. We all knew that this was going to be a record-setting event, and that we were a part of history. And there was so much excitement around the event. In Toronto was electric at the time. Again, it was my wife and I who were there for that. So this is somebody who has witnessed the sort of transition of mixed martial arts and couldn't recognize what they were witnessing on Sunday night. So to me, this contraction is so clear. It's shocking that the UFC is undergoing this enshittification process where we're bombarded by low quality events regularly, mediocre, mid, whatever you want to call it, events regularly, bombarded by this. And yet they're more profitable than ever before and experiencing a new surge in terms of audience. When I say that, it's because I've spoken to students recently who are either doing thesis, master's papers. They reach out to me and they tell me about why they chose MMA as a subject matter and why they're talking to me. And a lot of them will say things like, well, we just became a fan in the last year and then realized what we got ourselves into. But the UFC is clearly still winning new people over. These are 20-year-olds, 19, 18-year-olds still working their way into the sport. So clearly the UFC still has that stranglehold over young men. But in this case, it was actually a woman on the phone with me. So just young people in general.
I do think that they have a stranglehold on young men in particular and the ability to generate new fans with women. But I wonder how that's going to change after this event, or maybe it won't. But let's talk about it. So I don't bring this up because I think this is the most substantive political critique between the union of Trump and UFC. And I think for me personally, the mix of what do you want to say, techno fascism, state power, U.S. empire, and combat sports. It seems to me like that was a big giant pull together. I think that's the thing I want to focus in on, but I don't think we can start there because if you just Google UFC White House, everything is Josh Hokett. Everything, every conversation is about Josh Hokett. So let's set the table here. Josh Hokett is a UFC heavyweight. He was an All-American wrestler, I think, at Fresno State. He also briefly made it to the NFL, but washed out pretty quickly. But he is a good athlete. He played Division I football and, again, was a Division I wrestler. He has quickly moved through the ranks at heavyweight, in part to your point about enshittification, Kareem. For folks who don't know, the UFC heavyweight division is maybe the worst I've seen it in almost 15, maybe 20 years. It has declined precipitously. And Hokett's
Sorry to quickly interrupt and just say that I couldn't believe I still saw on Sunday night that Derek Lewis was still in the top 10
right.
at heavyweight. That proves your point right there.
Right. I mean, honestly, if you're a halfway decent like Division I football player, I'm not even joking when I say there's a good chance you could become a UFC heavyweight champion. Putting that to the side, he has risen pretty quickly, and after the fight is over, he beats Derek Lewis, and he is good. He's still raw, but he's good. He's a good fighter. And after the fight is over, Joe Rogan interviews him, and he says a bunch of nonsense, including he thanks Jesus, which is really important if you know anything about MMA. And then says Michelle Obama is a man. This has caused enormous unrest. I think one piece of news I want to add, and then I'll ask you your impressions of what the blowback means to all of this, is that for folks who don't realize this is not the first time he's done something like this at all. There's a tryout show which you have to pass through to get into the UFC. It's called the Contender Series. He won on that, and then in the post-fight interview, he goes after transgender people. Okay, then fast forward into his UFC career. I don't forget which opponent it was. He beats them, same thing, microphone in his face, And then he said Brittany Griner, the WNBA player who was locked up in Russia for a time, Brittany Griner is a man. And now, of course, after this one, he ups the ante and says Michelle Obama is a man on the grounds of the White House. You have seen the blowback, you've seen the event. Tell me what it all means.
Well, first of all, the statement he's making is part of this the conspiracy fueled cesspool that we see within the UFC. The Michelle Obama is a man. First of all, it's a horrific statement. It is bigoted, it's racist, it's misogynistic, but it also emerges from the anti-trans narratives that are being heavily pushed by the far right. So Hoket is just the latest personification of that within the UFC. And of course, he is not a standalone problem. Right? We've talked about Bryce Mitchell, Sean Strickland, who, as you said, is extremely unwell and was also a character on Sunday night, if not in the cage. But Bryce Mitchell with his Hitler apology as well. These are figures who continue to be welcomed in the UFC, and Hoket, despite the organization being well aware of who he is, like you said, he has said things like this in the past. They still were willing to put him on the White House card. They still were willing to put him on there. And despite it receiving blowback, I have thoughts here. The UFC's Teflon. It will emerge from this unscathed with no concerns and no issues because it faces no consequences for things like this. Hokit himself will face no consequences. As a matter of fact, he was one of the people victorious and got to shake the president's hand. There are images on the White House's press gallery of Donald Trump shaking hands with Hokit. So if you're wondering how the response has been for him afterwards, there it is. Now, with regards to the liberal media response to this, I have concerns. Here's why. To me, this was an obvious. Again, I have said this. This is racist, misogynistic, and transphobic. But it was also outrage baiting, and the liberals ate it up. They absolutely ate it up for an event where there was so much to criticize: the corruption, the patronage system that exists, right? The militarism of the event, the sheer propaganda spectacle of it all, what it means for the UFC and Donald Trump long term. These were all legitimate talking points that you and I had laid the groundwork for all these media organizations over the past few weeks. Yet, what is it that becomes the most popular thing to talk about on social media? What were the first articles written? About Josh Hokett and how this basically proves the barbarism of the UFC. These people just wanted uh, a way to prove their own points correct. There's a term for this, and it's not in my head at this very moment, but confirmation bias. That's exactly what it is. This was an attempt at confirmation bias. Look, see, I told you the UFC was garbage, and this Josh Hokett incident proves it. The problem with that, Luke, the polarization that already exists within the sport remains, right? This idea that this is a sport for the right wing and the liberals and the left had all the reason not to associate themselves with the sport, and that Hokett incident proves it, is the problem here. Because if Democrats and liberals and the left don't engage with mixed martial arts, then we see that territory, we see combat sports and mixed and martial arts in general to the right, and it does not belong to them. But if you continue to act this way and act like this sport is barbaric and that one instant that you saw in the cage is what proves it, well, then you leave no choice for most MMA fans or people who are apolitical, right, and apathetic towards all this. They'll say, well, the left doesn't want me anyway. It doesn't want to engage with me. This is in my book, by the way. I spoke to the UFC founder, one of the UFC co-founders, Campbell McLaren, who, among many things, was a character and absolutely worth your time as an interview. I'm glad I spoke to him for the book because his quotes are littered throughout the book. But one of the points he makes is that, well, he has an organization right now, Combate, and he's been trying to engage with Democrats and the left, and nobody wants to take him seriously. That is a problem. That is moronic behavior from the Democratic Party and will cost them. I wish we would just learn from our lessons. We ceded this territory to Trump in 2020 and 2024, and look where it got us. You're going to do this one more time? Do you really never learn from history?
Can I push back on this a little?
Please do.
Because I don't know how much I used to believe this. And it's not that I don't believe it, but I have a nagging feeling in the back of my head in a different direction. So, like, for example, one of the things that often I get discussed about is, masculinity for young men, because it's not exactly that the masculinity I grew up with was all that great. But I at least thought highly of, guys who read books or something, and that is just completely gone. So it has deteriorated further, is perhaps a better way to put it. And then, one thing that I get all the time is like, hey, we can't let the right think that they own either, not even just martial arts, but just like gym culture, right? The gym's for everyone, which is true. Quite obviously, the gym is for everyone. But like the influencer culture tends to lean a little to the right, and they take sort of as a mantle, masculine projection in that way. And then I see a lot of liberals on the other side try and be like, oh, no, 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 I go to the gym too, or I'm
Mhm.
a BJJ black belt. And I have the weakness in my argument is that I have heard people say, hey, if I had never gone to a jiu-jitsu class and seen a liberal there who was a black belt, I would have never even known that they're part of it. And it changed my perspective. So like I do admit that as a weakness in my argument, but I just can't help shaking the feeling, Kareem, at age 46, that like part of what is happening is that in that particular debate is that we're just performing masculinity for them on their terms. And you can't win that battle because I've seen Navy SEALs who turn left and then everyone turns on them. And it's like, well, dude, if a Navy SEAL doesn't qualify under these guidelines, I don't have a prayer. And, you're saying that we can't cede MMA to the right. I think it's seated, my guy. I think it's seated. I There's going to be, because of the point we raised earlier, right? So internally within MMA, the fans are not going to revolt. They're
Mhm.
desperate for some shit like this. They're not going to revolt. We've already also postulated that, or posited, excuse me, that the left wing media is, going to be antagonistic and the right wing media is not. And my own personal experience is that I have never felt less effective than I do now. What am I missing about all of this?
First of all, I think you're absolutely right in all of this. We cannot perform masculinity on their terms and expect to win or expect anything to change. The whole idea, one of the things that really bothered me was post Trump, one of the statements that emerged was the left needs its own Joe Rogan. Well, no, the left needs to be creative and come up with its own ways of utilizing these things. So you can perform on their terms. But that's not to say that the left didn't have a place in combat sports and martial arts in the past, right? It's just us remembering, is this a form of resistance? Is this a way to have fun? And how do you engage with that? I think that's going to be important. As for, I'm thinking about, okay, there are issues with masculinity and mixed martial arts that make it perfect for the right. I wrote about this just in my piece that went up today. The UFC likes to view itself as this perfect meritocracy, right? This space where the toughest person wins. Baddest man is going to win, and not just that. It's a place where an underdog can rise to be victorious if you just work hard enough. These narratives tie perfectly with the Republican and conservative pick yourself up by your bootstraps mentality. So naturally, the two fit very well together. So it's very easy for somebody who's conservative or Republican to tie into the sport because, say, right now we're having this. Some will call it a crisis of modern masculinity. Some will say this is an evolution or a new phase, and there's a rebellion from people who want to retreat back to a traditional masculinity. So you've got the young men all around the world who can't find their place right now. I've spoken to quite a few people who are like this. I won't say they're conservative, I won't say they're problematic people, but they are very concerned about their place in the world. They're not able to date easily. These are normal human beings. Some of these people will watch TV for an hour or two or three a night or a week, sorry. They can turn on the TV and watch the UFC and believe that there's a world where they can operate within this type of meritocracy. So it's an extremely attractive narrative for them. But again, the left, this is something that goes beyond mixed martial arts. The left has to learn how to engage with masculinity again, right? So I don't have the answers here. I've spoken to different groups. I think of the group behind Movember, for example. They found a way to get men to talk about prostate cancer because it's not just and about health. It's not just figuring out how to get men to fight for the left. No, 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 no. You have to understand that we're going through this issue now where we can't even sit with other men and have conversations anymore that are emotional. I have friends who I still struggle to engage with. I found this even in myself that have an easier time communicating with women. I have more female friends in my life just because naturally, when I wanted to be emotional or really want to be vulnerable, those were the people in my life who was easiest to engage with. Men, we seem to always need, watching a football game or being at a bar. We needed some activity to engage with to allow us to be that type of vulnerable. So if we don't really figure out how to address how we want to operate with our masculinity and what it means in 2026 and moving forward, we will not be able to address the left's role in masculinity in combat sports. But all these things are connected. But I don't have the answers. But I do believe that there's a way for us to address this and move forward.
Circling back to the Hokit thing specifically, if I may, I wonder what you think of what I took from it, which was, um, it's not just a Hokit thing, although the Hokit thing just kind of supercharged it. I mean, of all the criticisms that you saw before the event, they kind of centered, well, a lot of them were on tacky and trashy. But the point I'm trying to make is after Hokit does what he does, and by the way, like probably not a coincidence that Brittany Griner and Michelle Obama, both black women, I suspect that that's not a coincidence. But
Mhm.
in any event, um, I saw senators tweeting about it. I saw sitting members of Congress, in the House, excuse me, tweeting about it. And again, we kind of talked about to what extent they might have a regulatory target on their back or not. Putting that to the side, what I do think this event is going to do, and I do think the Hokit thing supercharged it, man, it's gonna further bifurcate uh who likes MMA and who doesn't. Like it's already self-sorting, but I just feel like the right, because I saw the right come out and not stupid people in the okay. Jack Posobiec was tweeting about it and he's stupid. But I saw a Republican pollster who I kind of do respect his work, actually. I think he does some pretty good work time to time. And he was even remarking about how much it was like a thing that Trump delivered for us. Right. And I saw Tim Pool again. These are not luminaries of great thought, but what does his support signal? And then on the other side, again, everybody on the left has lost their mind about it. I feel like this is going to harden attitudes on both sides in a way that the UFC maybe has never faced on those terms before. I wonder what you make of that.
I think that's true. One of the first things I said was I think Hoket's statement adds that polarization of who can accept mixed martial arts and not, and harden those lines where the left was saying, or liberals or Democrats were saying, see, this is not a sport for us at all, and here's why. But I've seen also arguments being made that this could impact the UFC, whether through legislation or issues moving forward. And I'm just not sure. Again, I'd like to hear your thoughts here. Maybe I'm just too much of a cynic, but if Democrats haven't really been able to rally behind anything to oppose Trump for the most part so far, all the bills have been signed, et cetera, what makes us think that something, for instance, like the reforms that they're trying to make to the Ali Act will actually get stopped? I understand that there is potential stalling in the Senate, but are you telling me Trump really can't get this through if he wants to? Like, to me, I still struggle with this idea that the UFC is going to face any consequences here. Sure, it has further been polarized towards the right, and so has the sport of mixed martial arts in total. But I mean, that was the direction we were heading in very steadily over the past decade anyway. And there's been nothing to suggest that the UFC is suffering anything financially, economically, or culturally at this point.
Yeah, I feel like this for folks who don't realize that they're trying to get this Ali Act through Congress. My understanding is they want to do it before the midterms. Of course they
Mhm,
do.
mhm.
Because the Dems, I don't think they could, let's just say they could retake the Senate. Uh, but of course you have to clear 60 votes, not just the pure majority, because you're gonna have to beat, some of the Senate rules that would prevent it. So you have to get to 60. Is there enough resistance to do that? We don't really know the answer yet. I can just tell you that the committee that it's like, I forget the full name of it. It's like Science, Commerce, and a bunch of other things in the Senate. It's got Jackie Rosen, who's taken money from TKO, and Ted Cruz, and so that's a Democrat and a Republican. Like we discussed this previously. Like one of the funny parts about this when it passed with the House, and this was a question I got too during interviews, was like it was like pretty bipartisan. I mean, even Ilhan Omar voted for it after adding a pretty terrible amendment to the legislation. I might add. And then, people asked me to explain that. I was like, well, do I need to explain that the Democratic Party just lays down? I mean, that's just what they do. They just lay down. So I don't, I will say that I think that the winds have maybe gotten stiffer, but I'll take a wait and see approach on whether or not this legislation is going to get thwarted. Now, after the midterms, obviously, who cares? Because if this gets pushed through in this summer is what I'm hearing is what they want, and maybe as soon as next month.
The problem,
So we'll see.
the, the problem to me is there even enough awareness as to what this bill is and why you should be stopping it? Like amongst Democrats, like I understand we've been raising this awareness now. We've been writing. Our audiences understand the importance of this, but do Democrats understand it? I say this because you say bipartisan bill, well, the first Democrat they had on that bill was Sharice Davids, right?
A
The one.
traitor, a traitor.
Yeah. Absolutely. Could not agree more. This is somebody I interviewed in 2018 when she was first running for Congress. Because to me, it was fascinating having a former MMA fighter, an indigenous woman, one of the first indigenous women in Congress, too. And as a Democrat as well, what a story, right? And what a exception to the rule when you think of who participates in mixed martial arts. And she seemed like a wonderful, intelligent human being. And yet, this is one of the first people to sign on to this bill. So when we talk about bipartisan support, it's got Democrats that you would have absolutely thought would oppose Trump and would understand the exploitation that mixed martial arts fighters face.
Uh, there was an article about her because someone in the not the White House press corps, but the out in, some congressional reporter had looked around and said, "Hey, are you going to this event?" And she had declined, and they were like, "Wow, like the one MMA fighter in Congress doesn't want to go." And I was like, "Guys, she helped put the legislation that's going to ruin boxing in place. Like the liberal media they do this constantly with Rogan being like, I think this event is the headline will be like Rogan thinks event is bad idea. And then when you drill down to the comments, he just means he doesn't want to do it outside. Like it had nothing to do with anything else. Same thing with this, where they just, oh wow, Sharice Davids doesn't want to go. I'm like, guys, she's in business with them. Like, what are we talking about here? All right.
I can't tell if it's disingenuous, is it willfully ignorant? Sometimes is it just clickbait for the sake of it? But you wonder, you come to wonder. This is exactly why there's such an erosion in trust, and that even these media outlets that I want to respect, that generally know what they're talking about, they're clearly trying to bait me here, and I
Hmm.
despise stuff like that.
So let's talk about the event in beyond the Josh Hokett one, which again I know is the biggest one, but not really the biggest one. I had a feeling when this was over. This to me, and I partly am bringing to the fact that I live in DC, and so I've been down on the National Mall during July 4th. They've got a huge FIFA Fan Fest down there now, and this to me felt like a mix of 4th of July on the mall, CPAC, and a UFC event. Imagine you melded all of that together because there was Turning Point USA ads airing at the Fan Fest, and they had on one on the Octagon floor as well. Mark Zuckerberg is trying to get good press after he gets a judgment found against his company to the tune of hundreds of millions for making their product unsafe for kids and teens. I guess there's just so many hobby horses. Tony Hinchcliffe is there, by the way, so it's sort of like conservative luminaries all being part of it. Do you feel like it was those three pillars? How did you understand what it all looked like together when you got to see all the different pieces?
Oh, that's a great description of it. Honestly, CPAC in particular, I think is great. Add some sort of not military parade, but some sort of event that would a U.S. equivalent that would give you the sense of a big focus on the military. I'm not 100% sure what that would be specifically, but it is entirely those combinations. To me, what was really interesting, you're talking about Tony Hinchcliffe and the people who are there. First of all, the least funny human being on the face of this earth. I truly can. He makes Rogan.
I don't know. Josh Hokett's pretty bad.
But I mean, fair enough. But I just don't understand people's fascination with Hinchcliffe. I really don't get it. What's really interesting is one of the things I tried to do was people watch and who's cage side and who's there and why. And first of all, Ari Emanuel sitting right there. I mean, none of the fighters were going and shaking his hand, but they'll start with Dana or Trump, etc. But he's right there, right beside them. And notice he was sort of ushering people around to meet with Donald Trump throughout the event. So between fights and stuff like that, you'd see him sort of walking over. You'd see Mark Zuckerberg hunching over and talking to Donald Trump. It seems that uh, cage fights like this at the UFC have become the new golf course, where deals used to be made on the golf course. Now everything is being made, and where you need to be seen to be somebody is at a UFC event, and that in itself is just fascinating. But you had David Ellison there, right? And this is somebody who's very happy with Donald Trump at the moment because his DOJ just just allowed the merger, sorry, with Warner Brothers, right? It's basically cementing maybe the biggest media conglomerates in the world right now. So a lot is changing, and it's happening because all these figures are able to ingratiate themselves to Donald Trump through the UFC. This, to me, looked like we're watching the new oligarchy. I have had this thought in my head, maybe because I'm not an American, it's going to be blasphemous to a lot of Americans, but I think of America and Russia and their relationship over the years, of course, because I've spent a lot of time in Russia and I've seen a lot of the connections through there. But to me, sometimes I think of them as two sides of the same coin, even though they hate each other so much and they really view themselves so differently. But when I see Donald Trump surrounded by Jeff Bezos, by the crypto.com CEO, which, by the way, my God, never put that man's face on television ever again. That was
Mhm.
terrifying, genuinely. But you see these figures around Trump, and I can't help but think that this is the new American oligarchy, right? And this is the future of how we're going to approach the United States. And it's going to be this system of patronage that exists, this nepotism that exists, and it's all going to happen cage side at a UFC event. So that to me was just one side element to all of this. But beyond that, as we talked about, this was a marriage of patriotism with bloodlust, bellicism, bellicism and militarism with the spectacle as well. It was a perfect encapsulation of what not just the UFC has become, but what America is also quickly becoming now as well.
I saw people, obviously not on the left, but I saw people on the right. I think I mentioned this earlier today, but I want to just drive it home. I saw people on the right say in these words that Donald Trump delivered this for them. And delivered is a very interesting word because we are in the shadow of what is almost, I mean, they're going to spin it, but there's no way around it. And I take no joy in saying it. It's utter humiliation for the United States in this Iran war. And this is terrible what has, in terms of what Trump wanted anyway. Um, so there's that. And obviously prices are sky high and healthcare is only getting worse. And, what has he really delivered, which is why his numbers have declined. And then to hear this word delivered, this was a win to them. This was a victory of some kind. And it was a victory made possible not just because of UFC fights, although, it was triumphant. The fights the fights delivered in the way that they were supposed to deliver, I suppose. But to your point, this patriotism theater that went everywhere, it's kind of interesting to me. They had these Medal of Honor recipients, and I'll never forget what one of my drill instructors said, because it's the highest honor you can get in the military. And he was like, I would never want it. And one of the recruits asked him why. He's like, because most of the time you got to be dead to get it. And you had all living ones, which is very, very rare to see. But like, obviously they got some older ones, but they didn't get any mangled ones, right? They didn't get burn victims, they didn't get amputees, they didn't get anybody like that. There was still kind of this sanitization of the military life and the military sacrifice and the military reality. Having burn victim, amputee, veterans out there, or award, Medal of Honor recipients or whoever. That's transparency. That's transparency about their heroism, but it's transparency about what we're up to. And getting ones that are just ambulatory but for old age doesn't really do that. And so I kind of want to like turn this a little bit, if we can, into that war.gov ad. I think of everything I saw on that broadcast, that was the one that was like, whoa. We are in, as I mentioned, Kareem, we are in the middle of the shadow of a long humiliation that we just suffered. American empire is being questioned generally. There's belligerence, certainly in the Western Hemisphere, Greenland, Canada, Cuba, Venezuela, elections in Colombia coming up this weekend, unrest in Bolivia. U.S. has a hand in all of it. And yet they're using this event, they're using the fights, they're using the fighters and the heroism and the spectacle and the grandeur of it to sell a recruitment / image laundering effort around basically the really bad parts of empire and hegemony. I wonder your reaction to that inclusion and the military more broadly.
That was the most chilling part of the entire broadcast. It was the only point where my jaw dropped and I could not believe even then that I was watching this. And we had just witnessed so much military propaganda and all the AI slop videos of the American history.
Those were
Ronald
so bad,
Reagan
by the way. Those
were
were a huge
unbelievable.
miss.
Those were unbelievable. Those were cringy for sure, right? Those were terrible. Then you had Reagan's speech on Flag Day. It's just some really, really awful choices. And then this comes on before the main event. And may I add, the debut of this ad. So they waited for this precise moment
Mm.
to drop this ad because it only appeared because I was looking for, as soon as I watched this, I'm like, oh, I'm going to need this for my writing. Immediately I thought I'd led my article that I posted today and it will be featured in my book as well. But I immediately went searching for it. And it was only moments later that uh, I believe it was spokespeople from the Department of War that actually posted it saying, our very first ad. And now it's been posted, now it appeared on the UFC first and then was posted online thereafter. It actually looks, what I don't understand here is usually in these scenarios, you try and have maybe something uplifting in terms of music. But they actually had ominous super, like it was Marvel super villains. If you're watching a Marvel movie and you've got the origin scene or story of the villain, it would sound and look a lot like what this video was. I don't understand how this was supposed to be something promoting the United States or making its friends or allies respect them, because it was terrifying to look at. All you're seeing is various examples of soldiers invading beaches, firing tanks, dropping bombs. This is
Mhm.
all the worst aspects of American empire, as you say, and of imperialism in general. And they are promoting this with glee and with joy and spreading statements like, first of all, America is winning is sounds like Charlie Sheen to me. I don't take stuff like that seriously, but it's Trump's commitment to the phrase peace through strength. And this is important here because you tie it into his general ideology right now of might is right, which is the phrase I've been using to describe how he's approaching both domestic policy and foreign policy. I mean, to shatter relations with your allies and to bully tactic your way through politics and is basically that. And I think the incorporation of the military and the UFC are the perfect analogy for this ideology as a whole. And you saw it encompassed perfectly in this 90-second clip here, right? Because it was both. I mean, this is coming right after the supposed ceasefire agreement with Iran, the terrible deal for the United States after a war that they should never have entered to begin with. So there's an element of erasure happening there because they're still promoting Trump's statements that it is the wars we never have to get into and displaying elements of peace through strength, which not exactly what happened earlier that day or over the last few months, is it? But the image laundering that happens through that video, coupled with the displays that you see at the UFC event of celebrating the military and patriotism, can really obfuscate all of that, can make you forget what you're actually witnessing. Maybe not us looking right there, but for the most part, I would see there was almost a moment on Twitter and on Blue Sky where people were like, oof, what was that? And then they were on to the next thing. They were watching Justin Gaethje in the main event, and they completely forgot about it. So there is a perfect unity here happening between the UFC and the military. And it's not just in that ad, by the way. I'll mention one more thing, which is the UFC sponsorship with, or recent agreement with Enduril, which is a defense tech organization that, beyond just partnering with Israel, has billions of dollars in contracts and agreements with the United States government, is one of the major recipients and beneficiaries of Trump's plan to reindustrialize the US military. And was one of the sponsors at the event, and its whole thing is creating autonomous drones and using AI to perfect warfare and surveillance, by the way, because they're surveilling the US Mexico border as well. They're one of the UFC sponsors. They were flat out placed on the canvas with their logo and the words fight unfair beneath it. Then the UFC was airing drone ads for them as well, right? And according to the press release, Enduril is also planning to host military-themed Zuffa boxing events where active service members will be competing. So this merging of the military and the UFC is just getting started. That we're entering a new phase of this relationship. I know I said this the last time we spoke, but I'm utterly convinced about it now.
There's simply no question in my mind. Let me add a little bit to that. Back in, I'm looking it up here now, 2008, and then I think a couple of them 2011 or 2013, the UFC had a series called Fight for the Troops. And you got to remember, this is, the 9/11 happens, and then in the Iraq war invasion in 2003, the U.S. at that time was trying to take a different track with soldiers and veterans relative to Vietnam, where famously Vietnam soldiers would come back and they would claim to be spat on by people, and so there was this reverse, like we're really going to take care of them, and they are inherently political as well. But the UFC was not as political. There wasn't the same kind of political baggage, and two of these events happened during Obama's time, right?
Mhm.
They're
Mhm.
talking about restarting it now. They're talking about restarting it now with President Trump, making it, I don't know, Kareem, a franchise once a year. It's hard to say exactly. And to be clear, if you've never seen a Fight for the Troops thing, these are much, much smaller than what you got on Sunday. For example, the one I can remember the most, Kareem, they had in a military airport hangar. I mean, a cool setting, but much, much, much more modest. This is more Cinderella's pumpkin than it is, something
Mhm.
else, right? So they're thinking about doing that as well. And that's, Andoril is more on the Zuffa boxing side. But when you just sort of comprehensively look at the marriage of surveillance tech, capitalism, oligarch class, and not just surveillance tech, but other forms of tech in terms of Mark Zuckerberg, Dana White's on the board there. And then this promotion of militarism, a particular brand of militarism, I might add. It's one thing that people always say. It's like, oh, you don't support the military. The military can do many, many different things. It's a brand of militarism. It's a brand of patriotism as well, Kareem. That is, it's the way in which Donald Trump wants you to understand it is as a function of him, not just the octagon, but the military itself, not, more than as commander in chief, as an expression of him, as an expression of his ethos. And the UFC is helping to unite all of these forces. And I think that was really visible on Sunday.
I mean, there's very little I can add to that, Luke. You're entirely correct here. To me, the UFC, and this is maybe the biggest question I try and answer in the book, my new book that's coming out, is why the UFC, why MMA specifically, and we'll see if people agree with my analysis and why I chose this sport and what I came to the conclusion of. But it is the perfect vessel to display and to brandish a very specific type of masculinity, and from there you can supercharge that into whatever you want: strongman and autocratic traits, into military propaganda. Right? You can take it and build whatever you want from that. You think of Mark Zuckerberg, right? Who really, for most people, especially our generation, as he was coming up, there was no bigger nerd than Mark Zuckerberg, and this is somebody who utilized two things: jujitsu first, and then mixed martial arts to try and rebrand himself as a man's man. Right, apart from participating in competitions, he then, in order to secure sort of a relationship with Donald Trump, to ingratiate himself to Donald Trump, brought Dana White onto the board of directors at Meta. I think, just using that as one example shows us where we are in the United States and what role mixed martial arts plays in both, displaying, brandishing, and improving your own masculinity, or performing that masculinity, because that's at the end of the day what Zuckerberg is actually doing here, and how it is a conduit to all these other facets of US society, culture, life, and politics at the same time. And there is a unification happening right now under this Trump UFC machine, unlike anything we've seen before. It's shocking to me. I've written a whole book, 80,000 words, and after this event, I feel I could do another 80,000, trying to break not just this event down, but this new added stage and where I think we're going. Because
Hmm.
I was approaching this really for over the past year as this is a culmination point. No longer, no longer. We've just started a new chapter.
There's no question. To piggyback on this and then to use it to get to another part, if I may, is for folks. This is something that's come up again. Doing these interviews has been really illuminating. We could have a conversation just on what we've learned from doing these. Because one thing that I have said to these people while I'm out there, I'm like, if you're the worst, and I'm paraphrasing here a little bit, but I'm like, if you're the worst person on earth, but you have money, the very smartest thing you could do is pretend to be an MMA fan. or boxing fan too, depending on how much money you have. But somewhere in fight culture, because what you guys don't understand out there, if you're not inside fight culture is absolutely never. It's never going to turn down money, and it's basically, with very minimal exception, never going to say no to someone, especially if they have money. So they're like Riyadh season faced almost no friction whatsoever in getting involved in boxing. Now it's a little harder to get their foot in MMA by virtue of the UFC retaining full control and then Zuffa boxing not being as big yet. But let me use that as the pivot point, because Mark Zuckerberg, to your point, rather, excuse me, really rehabilitating his image, or at least trying to, and then also ingratiate himself into these other networks, is part of it. And then we had a Riyadh season ad on the Octagon at the White House. Kareem, why was there a Riyadh season ad on the floor of the Octagon?
Well, Luke, I mean, I think a key alliance that the United States still maintains, even through the Trump administration, is one with the Saudi government. They're very happy to take that money where they can. But also, Turkish Sheikh is, well, who's the technically the person responsible for the general entertainment authority in Saudi Arabia. Let's call him the entertainment czar of Saudi Arabia. He's really a henchman for Mohammed bin Salman. And he is one of the figureheads behind Zuffa boxing. So when we talk about this lobbying effort that TKO and the UFC are undergoing in the US Congress right now, this is backed by Saudi Arabia, an entity that knows very well how to lobby its interests, because it's done so. Its two biggest points, because I've checked all the FARA documents actually, the two biggest points in its history where it lobbied, of course, were post 9/11 and, of course, following the dismemberment of Jamal Khashoggi. So, and that worked out perfectly for them. So they understand how to lobby in the United States. They're working with the UFC and, of course, its powerful backers like Ari Emanuel to ensure that they can pass this legislation. Why? Because Saudi Arabia took one look at the UFC, took one look at its business model, and said, I want that for boxing. I want that. That's how we should be running things. Because they understood this was such a successful venture. We only have to pay out 13 to 14% of revenues to the fighters. They have no associations. We control the media, the landscape, the belts, the ranking systems. This is perfect. It's all too perfect. I mean, when you really think about it, who would want any other structure? If you could have it the UFC's way, of course you're going to do so.
Right.
So Saudi Arabia is going all in on this. And I truly believe they're not. Listen, I know we've had this discussion as well, that Saudi Arabia has pulled back from a lot of investments, specifically through the public investment fund. I don't think that that's going to impact Turkish Sheikh. First of all, his money is not coming from the public investment fund. Sure, it's all still coming from the same giant pot, being the Saudi government at the end of the day. But I think they understand that there is true influence and power to be gained here. They can dominate this sport, and maybe by extension all of combat sports, if they further cement that relationship with the UFC and with TKO, maybe buy all of it one day, in a way that they don't have across other sports. I'd say maybe the other sport that they've really staked their claim in is football, soccer, whichever you want to call it. But because they just this sheer amount of sponsorships. If you're watching the World Cup right now, you must be seeing all the Aramco ads across stadiums.
Everywhere. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, there's going to be Riyadh Air as well ads. I mean, these are sponsorships for airlines that haven't even taken off yet, right? They're completely, and this is money that none of these federations want to say no to. So, of course, they're in bed with Saudi Arabia. It has strengthened its position. It's now getting its own members elected into various positions. They're buying more clubs still. So, no, there's a lot. Football is still the stronghold, but boxing, and through that, the rest of combat sports is going to be Saudi's domain as well.
Let's talk about Trump himself. I want to tell you what somebody in the inside of MMA told me, and this is not a MAGA person by any stretch. I mean, I don't think they're like, hardcore left, but they're definitely not MAGA at all. I know them well. And what they told me was, hey, yes, of course. I mean, being at the White House kind of makes the argument that it's not. They knew that it was a political event. But what they did say was that, the UFC kind of turned down the pro-Trump aspect of the event. Now, I don't agree with that, but one thing that was put to me was they say, for example, they don't ever interview Trump. They don't mention that it's his birthday. They kind of, he's sat there, he's brought out, he's pushed. I mean, again, it's at his house. There's some level of unavoidability to it, but that they felt like the real focus of the event was kind of elsewhere. What do you make of that?
Honestly, I personally thought that there might have been a bit more attention on Trump. Obviously got the camera turned away. We got the entrance in the very beginning with Trump saluting from the White House with the military flyover happening. We had a few strong Trump moments there. But you're right, the UFC did not mention it was his birthday. But I think that's because, I mean, they're promoting this event as a Freedom 250 event. If they really emphasize that it's his birthday, then I think the jig is up at that point. So there's a good reason not to. The other thing I think, and honestly, this is just my opinion here. I mean, he just turned 80 years old, right? Like that's not maybe he personally doesn't want to promote that, especially with all the reports. Listen, whether true or not, I'm not sure. I try not to pay too much attention to them with his bruised hands and people saying, he's close to death and things like that, or that in general he's facing health concerns. So I think trying not to associate the fact that the president is now 80 years old, the same thing you were complaining about Joe Biden with just a few years ago,
Mm.
uh, seemed like an obvious choice in the end not to do so. But you're right. It wasn't there. And this is a question I almost want to throw back to you, Luke, more because I think you have a better basis to answer something like this. I'm not American. I don't experience patriotism when I see this, the stars and stripes. It's just not a thing for me. I'm generally not a patriotic person just because I see it as dangerous for the most part. When you really are engulfed by patriotism, you're less likely to be critical or be willing to be vocally critical, which is important to protect your country and to make it better in general. To make anything better, you need to be able to criticize it. And I don't think patriotism leaves room for that. So to me, yes, you can watch this event, maybe as an American, and say, wow, I mean, I'm so proud of my country. I'm proud of our previous achievements. Look at how beautiful this night looks. Look at how beautiful the White House looks. Again, it's another symbol that doesn't mean much to me. There's been a lot of writing about how this is sacred ground. But I'm an Arab. To me, the United States military in particular has a very different meaning to me. This is when I was a kid. I was 11 years old when I was watching the United States carpet bomb Baghdad. I still remember getting up and sitting with my parents and watching that invasion happen. I still remember Afghanistan as well, right? We're watching more wars that the US is involved with. Gaza, right? Iran. This is what I associate the US military with. Not with safety, not with protection, but with violence and imperialism. So I am never going to be the right person to answer that element, but I do want to hear from you. Is there a world where you can just sit back and say, this made me feel proud to be American?
I have a very different feeling about what patriotism actually is. First of all, I want to just side note about Trump's health. He is sick, and a funny little anecdote. You noted that Ari Emanuel was sitting next to him at this
Mhm.
event. Ari shakes his hand, and Trump shook him with his right hand naturally, and the photographers got all the makeup covering the bruising on the
Mhm.
outside of his hand. Now that's not the first time we've seen it, but it was on display. So it's
Okay.
something. It's an ongoing issue for him, quite clearly. But he seems durable. I don't know. I don't know how else to say it. Um,
All
I,
those Big Macs or something. I don't know.
I don't get it. I don't get it. But there he is. In any event, um, this I don't know if this sounds stupid to people. I really don't. But like, I remember I was never patriotic growing up. Not never, but averagely, let's say, as much as the average person. And then I went to boot camp, and I got more patriotic in the military, certainly. But it grew in a weird direction. Like, so for example, there's something called the flag code here. It's not law, although it is kind of law in the military, but um, you're not supposed to wear the American flag as clothes. You're not supposed to put it on mugs that you drink or hats or beer koozies or whatever. I find it off-putting to the nth degree, and there's a weird kind of patriotism that is, I think, at this point, kind of bipartisan, that turns it into showiness and over the topness as an indicator of commitment to it. And if there is one thing I do think is true, I just don't see patriotism as like, I'm going to put on my star spangled overalls, my Star Spangled Hat that's got two beers in it, and I'm going to drink it and say America. And it doesn't that mean I love the country? To me, if you love your country, you serve it. And I don't mean necessarily just in the military. I mean, you you can do that. You can run for local office, you can pay all of your taxes, you can, especially this is really critical, be a part of civic organizations or things that support your local community, or in some kind of way doing the thing that actually makes the country run, doing the thing that keeps society ordered, doing the things that are the hard work that is not thank that people don't come and slap a your back for. I mean, they might in certain cases anyway, but as a general rule, they don't necessarily do. To me, like the longer I live, like you want to ask me who is patriotic. Well, tell me what they did for the country. Like, what did you do? And again, I don't need Thomas Edison to invent the light bulb for democracy every time. But you know what I mean? Like, did you what did you do in your life? Did you ever locally volunteer? Did you ever serve in your community in some kind of a way? And if you didn't really do all those things, I'm not going to judge you as like unpatriotic, but I'm not going to judge you as patriotic if you have that resume and then you wear your Star Spangled Banner overalls. So I'm kind of the wrong guy to ask that question, to be honest with you.
But honestly, yeah, I've been thinking a lot about some of the things we had in our last some things you said in our last discussion, pardon me. And one of them was talking about sort of understanding that a lot of these military men that are there, this is performative, and that when you see people sort of celebrating the military in these performative ways like they do at the UFC event, saying, yeah, we had some of the fighters saying, thank the troops and thank all the first responders, etc. You were saying that this is not for them. This is not actually for the first responders. It's for the people saying this, because I hope I'm not paraphrasing here, because just to calm their own guilt, basically, or something of that element. And that's so crucially, like I hadn't thought of it that way, and it's so true. To me, that's exactly how I view this as well. And it's good to hear that from you, because
If I may, Kareem, I apologize for cutting you off, but like, just consider this: like, oh, they threw a party for the military and they thanked all of these, Medal of Honor recipients. Again, I'm not mad at Medal of Honor recipients getting a shine. These are people are it's the highest freaking honor you can get. But it's
Mhm.
like I'm not going to take lectures about what patriotism is from a commander in chief that is got all of our bases destroyed in the Middle East, and there's a question of whether we should have been there. But people died in the process in that regard. More to the point, if you notice these aircraft carriers, you may recall they had to park one in Greece because the plumbing system went down, and it's kind of speculated that it's because they had their tour extended two times. People on those ships were missing funerals for their parents. They were missing the birth of their children. It was only supposed to be a 6-month rotation, and it ended up being almost 2 years. So, like, to me, it's like when you say things like, "Oh, I love this country." Well, dude, if you love this country, you don't do that to the people who make it work. Period. You don't do that. And I just have a very different feeling about it.
I think I love that you connect patriotism, a term that I've generally tried to stay away from entirely, with things like civic duty and what you can do for your community as an individual, I think, and the collective good in general. And I think those are very important ways to reclaim the term, I think. So I'm glad to hear your perspective on this. I really am.
I think patriotism is service, and a high school teacher, like I believe, and my wife obviously comes from South America, and I asked her like, did when I first started getting to know her, and I was like, did you go to public school? She's like, no, you would never go to public school, and this is in
And
Colombia. You would never go
mhm,
because it's just for like the poorest of the poor, and so like when our daughter, it was time for her to go to school. She's like, well, we're going to send her to public school. I'm like, where? Yeah, like that's where we're going to. And that was a thing that she had to get used to. And so I feel like the people who make like public schools good, like that is patriotism to me. Like that's what I consider making America great. You know what I mean?
and
Anyway, go ahead.
here, I'll say one last thing, because it all ties to this. These are the ways to actually improve a country. When you say Trump talks about make America great again, these are the ways to do it. All these autocrats, all these world leaders and strong men around the world who invest in sports and big sports events and try to bring in these mega events, they do so because it's so much easier to host a big party, much like UFC Freedom 250, than it is to actually do the hard things and fix the country, like fixing the schools, fixing the hospitals, making sure people are employed. those are much harder. They're long term and they don't get the same kind of credit or instant gratification that a lot of these strongmen want straight away. It's not the same PR display. So, of course, they're going to go for the party. They're going to go for the sports event. They're going to go for the cage fight.
What did we miss about this? What else to you stood out with a political angle that's at least worth some kind of examination?
I think it's interesting that there was a segment of what we would have considered like the MAGA element of the UFC that really hated this. So there's almost like a schism occurring within the fighters and just within the space overall over the event and over Trump and his politics, much like there has been within the Republican Party. And it's a lot of this is over, of course, the war in Iran, and it's over the United States' relationship with Israel. And we've seen this with Sean Strickland. Now, I really don't want to elevate him as as a hero in any way here, because even as he makes criticisms of Israel, he does so with extreme anti-Semitism, and I can never get behind that. It's really that simple. I do not care how pro-Palestine you are or how anti-Israel you are. You don't get my support if you have proven to be a bigot or anti-Semitic in any other way, or you're just riding this wave to protect yourself somehow. Strickland falls under that category for me. But still, the fact that you had a UFC champion actually being dragged away by law enforcement officers that night, a hell of a picture to paint, isn't it? It's a hell of a
Mm.
picture. So to me, this is something, I mean, you'll see this in now being reported amongst left-wing media and stuff like that. It does feel like a bit of coping, like, oh my God, this entity is breaking apart. It is certainly not breaking apart. I think the union is strong between Trump and his core base, especially with events like this being put on. But it's interesting to see that it's not homogenous, it's not entirely unified, and that there is written resistance is the wrong word here, but rebellion to it, I think.
Let us know about your book. What's the story? I know there's a pre-order available starting today. We'll put when I post this video for folks who missed it live, I'll put a link in there. But what can you tell us about it?
I'm actually putting a link right now in the chat just in
Oh,
case people.
awesome.
Yeah, that's I'll just do that as well. But so yeah, the pre-order link and the cover has finally been revealed, and what was called initially "In the Shadow of the Cage" is now the Ultimate Strongman. And very excited about this book. We don't have a precise release date, but it will be early spring 2027. I am still in the stage where I'm writing the epilogue with the UFC White House just 48 hours, behind us now. I think I still have a lot of writing here to go. So I'm in those final stages. We're doing end notes and we're going to finish the editing stuff here. But I'm so excited, man. This has been the past year of my life. This book has meant a lot to me. A, because this is a sport I legitimately loved for a very, very long time. I hope I did an honest job in depicting the sport, depicting what I loved about it and what I absolutely detest, and telling a very personal story about my adventures through the sport, my time in Russia. There are stories in there that I've never shared before. Having to relive some of the experiences of the death threats I received uh, has not been fun. Writing those chapters was not fun, but they're there for a reason, because I think you need this whole picture to understand A, why I do what I do, and B, why mixed martial arts is the way it is. So I'm very proud of this book. I hope I still am by the time it comes out. I hope it's still relevant to the subject matter. And I hope it's well received by people in general. I'm already very lucky in that the book has already won a very prestigious award, the J. Anthony Lucas Prize for Books Work in Progress. And I mean, that's an award administered by Harvard and Columbia University. So I'm very, very lucky, as is, especially as somebody who's an outsider who has not generally received many flowers from the MMA community. I have received more horrible statements definitely than kind ones from people out there. I've been Most MMA media won't talk to me anymore. I'm just seen like as a troublemaker. I've long been seen as a troublemaker, but I also winning the award meant a lot because I always saw myself as a perennial runner up. I lost the MMA Journalism of the Year award 4 years in a row to the same person. I mean, you've been in this position, Luke, so it's not like I'm unique here, but that was quite something. I mean, they stopped putting me up for nominations after that. I mean, who wouldn't feel sorry for a situation like that? So it's nice to see. It's been 12 years and it's nice to see things turning around finally. So I hope this book represents that. And I hope this book means something to the people who are also finding themselves lost and isolated right now.
The wheels of justice grind slowly, Kareem, but they grind. They grind. What a wonderful conversation about a strange topic, I think is the way I would put it. I'm glad it's over. I am looking forward to the book. Kareem, I'm sure we'll talk again when more of this kind of news becomes forward, and I'll be reading your stuff over at Sports Politica. Thank you for this conversation. Thank you for the last one. And thank you for the years of coverage as well. I feel like we're all richer and more informed for the work you've done.
Likewise, Luke. Thank you so much. And like I said, if there's anybody I'd have these conversations with, it's absolutely you.
All
Until the
right.
next friend.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Take care.